Hey there, folks. Welcome into CMS-Connected here on the Pulse Network. I am Tyler Pyburn. This is the Web Content Management Industry News Commentary Show. Glad you guys could join us for another great episode. Of course, as always, joining me in studio happens to be Scott Liewehr. He's always here. He's my co-host. And of course, you guys also know directly next to him, he's also joining us right now, Seth Gottlieb, the Solutions Manager for Global Marketing Operations at Lionbridge. Seth, we brought you back.
Thank you.
We've got to have you here, right?
It could have gone either way. Thank you for having me back.
Excellent. So today we've got, obviously, as you see here, we have Scott and Seth in studio, but we also are going to be having Lisa Welchman from Welchman Purepoint joining us in studio as well. We've got a lot of great stuff to get to, so glad again you guys could join us, and make sure you continue to use the CMS-Connected hashtag to give us all your thoughts and opinions about everything going on throughout the entire industry. Now, before we begin, of course, we, as always, have to acknowledge our CMS-Connected sponsors who really make this whole thing happen. First off, we've got Falcon-Software. Falcon provides web creative, e-commerce, content management, social media, and mobile solutions for organizations across the globe. And of course, CM Pros as well. The Content Management Professionals Association helps its members by enhancing their knowledge and expertise, sharing practices, and connecting members from all over the world. Now, of course, we like to start off the show with the only way we know how, and that is go ahead and getting to the news. So if we're going to go ahead and get to the news, we have to start and talk about some mobile apps and web CMS. So that's where we're going right now, guys. On February 21st, now Martin Van Berkom, CTO GX Software, posted an article on CMS Wire titled Mobile Apps and Web CMS on a Collision Course or Major Synergy Value. Now in the article, Martin talks about how the move to a mobile app brings up many challenges to create consistent and seamless customer experiences. Now, the last few years, mobile definitely been a very hot topic. It's so hot people are actually beginning to call it the post-PC era. So guys, let's kind of get right into this right now. Are mobile apps and web CMS on a collision course or that major synergy value? Where are we looking at right now, Scott?
Sure. So I think the notion of a collision course just sounds negative, right? It kind of makes it sound like these two things are at odds with each other. And I definitely don't believe that that's true, although I certainly see that we have a lot more synergies now than we ever used to, right? We're starting to realize that mobile does not necessarily need to be all about apps. You know, so those of us who have iPhones and things think about these apps. And now I think we're, with the advent of HTML5 and those sorts of things, we're talking about a lot more capabilities for your CMS to actually help organizations participate on mobile and be more relevant in that experience. So I think,
yeah.
So they're colliding, but not in a bad way.
Yeah, I feel like this is deja vu, because in the earlier days of web content management, we always talked about multiple channels. That was the reason why we did separation of layout and content. That's the reason why we did different layers in our application, our business layer from our display layer. I mean, it seems like, you know, we've been waiting for this to happen for a really long time, and it hadn't happened. We hadn't had the other channel. We had RSS, we had email, but it wasn't really another channel.
Right.
So a lot of companies were kind of stepping back from that and saying, okay, we're back to editing web pages, and you had that type of feel for your content management system. But now the companies that really had the discipline of keeping that separation and the focus on editing content, not editing web pages, they're being rewarded because now they have these other channels to publish to.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's a very good point that you make, that it is deja vu all over again. And we should have been prepped for this all along, because it's essentially what we were waiting for,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is now for the vendors to all be, it's the latest part of their releases. We're going to talk about a product later today that's just talking about, you know, we can push to mobile, and it's like, wait, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the other channel in your diagram over there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's always been. But I definitely think, look, in all technology, I think it's such that the vendors and where they are in terms of the product roadmaps are always far ahead of where their consumer base is, right? And I think what we're finally starting to see is this catch-up. And so they might be marketing things. I mean, there's certainly new ways of doing stuff, and technology has come a ways since they were first positioning themselves to be able to be right for this. But I think at the end of the day, what we are seeing is organizations coming around to the fact that they should be present on mobile, and then they're looking to the vendors to say, wait a minute, do I have anything that can help me with
exactly,
this? Right?
Exactly. Yeah, and the vendors, I feel like they planned a little bit too early, and during that wait, we were getting complacent, and we were like, oh, it's never going to happen.
Exactly.
And then the smartphone happens, and
That's right.
Now.
I was going to say, go to that though, because I want to go and kind of hone in on that point in particular, the post-PC era.
Yeah.
Because people are in fact looking at that and saying, well, I mean, obviously, we're not here right now. It's not look at you and I.
Right.
We're still on our PCs right now.
You guys made me put my phone away.
Exactly. You have to put your phone away. It goes off. People keep calling it. But no, when we're looking at this, we're seeing the post-PC era and we're thinking about this. Do you in fact think that we're ever actually going to get to that point where the CMS vendors are actually going to say, well, you know what, we're not even going to be developing anymore for that part? Like you said, you know, well, mobile, it's in the back mind of the backs of a lot of people's minds, but now it's so much in the forefront that we're just kind of pushing PC to the back burner, if you will. What's your thought?
I think that the browser is going to be the home base for time to come, because that's the read more, that's getting the full story. You have the screen to work there. Mm-hmm. But I think that the initial impression that you get more and more likely could be from a small screen. And who knows, you know, maybe it's more the 10-foot experience, the television set as well. I mean, you really need to expect that the first introduction you get with a potential customer might not be through the big screen and or at least the PC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't love the term post-PC, right?
Yeah.
Because it basically means kind of like it's come and gone. And in fact, they're both here to stay. Or they're both at least here playing now. Who knows what's to come in the future. But I think it's definitely a both-and situation. But no question that it's what I think this is doing, and this is really right for folks to be thinking about. What I love about the mobile area is because of the form factor and the size and all that sort of stuff, while certainly that presents its own challenges, and it's about the physical, how do I get this information onto this device? So that's certainly what the technology helps to solve. But what I love about it is the perspective like you take about the consumers, thinking about your audience, this notion of at what point are people going to be engaging with my online brand from a phone? What are they going to be looking to do, or their iPad? It's typically something different than when I'm sitting at my PC, right? They're coming on, it's very transactionally oriented or whatever that might be, and how can I make my experience for them, my engagement with them, relevant on this much smaller thing? So I'm going to have to pick and choose what information, what content I show them, what I allow them to do, because I need to be in their mindset. So I love that it's putting companies back in this thinking about your audience, thinking about what they're there to do, and I think that's a great thing. Because that translates back, oh, by the way, to the web, where you might still have a much larger canvas, but you need to be thinking about what people are there to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent stuff. Great, guys. But you know what? We could continue on with mobile all day long. That's just the way it ends up working. But we do, in fact, have to move on. And I want to go ahead and let's talk about the Forrester 2012 Customer Experience Index right now. Now, Forrester recently announced the results of their 2012 Customer Experience Index in an effort to assess the state of customer experience altogether. Now, they asked more than 7,600 U.S. consumers about their interactions with a variety of companies, and based on their responses, Forrester calculated Customer Experience Index scores at 160 brands across 13 industries. So really, guys, how does this translate for those that rank at the top and the bottom of this index? I mean, you get two different ends of the spectrum. What are we looking at here?
Well, I think for the ones that are winding up on the bottom, it cuts their work out for them. And I think that they can no longer ignore the fact that they're at the bottom. And I also think that there's some evolving standards about what should be the benchmark. Where should you be if you expect to be serious in your customer engagement?
I think there's a lot to be learned from this whole thing generally. Number one, I hate that thing that you just showed up. The poor Forrester people, they've all done a relaunch of their website. Have you seen this now? They have a picture of the people who write the blog. It's just half of their face. Did you see that? I would never want that. Anyways. An important point to note about this study is that it's not just about online customer experience. This was about entire impressions, and we have to note specifically that customer experience is very much online and in-person, right, experiences.
Yeah,
so they're gauging the
entire experience.
They're gauging the whole thing, but I think you're asking about your point about the kind of the top and the bottom, and I think it's an important question because 2/3 of those who were studied on this that made this report actually ended up being very poor to okay. and only 3% were rated as excellent. And that has consistently actually dropped. They've been doing this study for 5 years. And over the past 5 years, it's consistently dropped down to the point that it actually was last year 6%. Now we've cut down to 3% are rated excellent. So I'm not sure what's going on.
That seems like it's at odds with all the attention, all the lip service that companies are paying, that they're investing in their online experience or their experience, and about social media. Maybe the expectations of the audience is increased. So
that's what I was going to say, and I'd love to ask Jamie about that when we get him on later. Is this the consumer expectations are heightening significantly? We're getting examples of some really great stellar customer experiences from some organizations, and we're trying to measure everyone against that. Or is it that organizations are just not doing as well as I think that they're doing? They're paying a lot more lip service, like you say, but they're just not really cutting the mustard. So
we'll definitely have to see that. So you mentioned Jamie, and he kind of let us know exactly what's to come right now. So of course we have to bring in another voice to kind of voice their opinion about this. Joining us via Skype right now, we have a customer experience expert. We welcome in Jamie Anderson from SAP. Jamie, I haven't seen you in quite some time, but welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. I don't know quite what that music is. I'm not sure I recognise the instrument. But, thank you for that. I feel like kind of saying, if it's not Scottish, it's crap.
Duly noted. We'll make sure to take note of that. So, Jamie, let's kind of delve right into it. What's your take on the Forrester 2012 Customer Experience Index? What's your thoughts?
Well, listening in as I was there to some of the the conversation that was going on, I think that I heard Scott saying that overall it looks like firms have really struggled. They've actually gone backwards, it would appear, in the index. And I think there's a combination of factors here. I think first of all, consumer expectations have definitely risen. I think fueled by how consumers behave, mobile and social technologies, what they expect from brands. There's really been a rise in consumer behaviour. I think it's less about the firms themselves, not doing as well. I mean, I think they are trying. I think they're struggling to keep up with the technological advancement that's actually happening in the consumer world. I think that really is kind of what's happening.
Sure. Jamie, welcome, and I'm glad that you enjoyed the intro music. It was special for you, picked out. So question then is, so you head up marketing for SAP's CRM product. How does that help us? What role does CRM play in all this, and how is it helping to improve customer experiences for organizations?
Well, ultimately, there's a deep amount of knowledge that firms have built up over years, whether it's been in their CRM systems or their ERP, landscapes. And I think Geoffrey Moore spoke, once about this combination of systems of record versus systems of engagement. And I think really what it's about is it's about the ability to combine that. There's deep customer insight in these systems. And sometimes I think that when we look at technology that's very channel focused, and in Scott, let's just take web content management, for example. It's about connecting these worlds together. It's about connecting the channel, the web channel, to the rich vein of information that exists about customers, across the enterprise. I think that's what comes into its own. That's what that information can now surface through a lot of the new technologies and the tools available to actually make the customer interactions more relevant.
Excellent, thanks. And we've had this conversation a number of times, most recently at the Inbound Marketing Summit, and I really enjoyed talking to you about this conversion of these worlds. And I think it's interesting that you raised that point, because my question would be to you is, CRM's been around for so long, right? I mean, you guys have been around, SAP has been playing this game for a long time, and it seems to me this notion of customer experience management, it's been around for 10 years. WCMers seem to just be kind of coming around to that. Why do you think there is this resurgence? Why do we suddenly kind of care about this so much more now? It's getting so much airplay, and that's why we're having you on today. What do you think?
Why do WCMers care about it? I think the thing is, right, if we look at it from one perspective, I could be very, very critical about CRM. I've seen, you know, in the years I've been involved in it, projects that have been successful and a great many projects that have missed the mark, which have actually not exceeded, the customer's expectations. And I think that there's been a sort of execution gap, and I think at times there has been a lot of bad press around CRM. So I think what happened was that, people looked beyond managing customer relationships and said, actually, managing the customer relationship is quite a multifaceted thing. It's a difficult thing to do. It's about connecting the customer to, a lot of your internal processes and so on. And, it's not a simple thing to do. But I think what you can manage effectively at the point of interaction is the experience the customer has. And I think what that did was it then focused the attention on a lot of the customer-facing technologies and customer-facing channels. So websites, for example, which, I've seen a lot broader adoption, as almost a primary channel. Mobile websites, if you look at, the impact mobile's had on all of this, I think that has played much more towards the world of web content management, and consequently, that's why I think a lot of the positioning about that, and not entirely wrong. I think a lot of the positioning around web, content management as a CEM tool is not entirely wrong, but it's about the next level. How do you, consistently make it relevant? Because the web is just one channel. So I guess that was part of the conversation we had.
Yeah, earlier we were talking about how it might be a factor of the expectations of the audience getting a lot higher, and we know the Clue Train manifesto of markets or conversations. I imagine that it's a big change for an organization to have every person to be a potential spokesperson for that organization and able to have a personal connection with individual members of the audience, because I think one theory would be that's what the audience is expecting, and that's why their expectations are not being met. What type of tools and strategies are there to enable a diverse workforce to speak the role of a brand or a company and achieve that connection?
Well, that's a great question, and obviously the role is challenge Jamie today, which I'm up for. Don't worry about that. But the thing I find is you mentioned one word, and this one word plays really strongly for me. It plays in everything that we're talking about. It plays very strongly in this conversation today, and that is connections. This is all about fundamentally making connections. Now, as I said, it's about connecting information, right, in your CRM and ERP systems about, let's take CRM, much more about customer preferences, whether it's marketing preferences, whether it's things that they like, whether it's in some way actually, distilling down, the things that are important to the customer. And then the transactional history, connecting that to the transactional history of the customer that tells you what they bought, when they bought it, potentially where they bought it, both online and offline, and then connecting that to some of these great web content management tools that make the customer experience in the online world as contextual and relevant as it needs to be to draw them in to that, that whole kind of experience. And it's important that it's connected because it's delivered as a silo. If CRM is delivered as a silo, if web content management is delivered in a kind of siloed approach, it means you get situations where, a customer could be on your website, they could have been researching, televisions, they could have been looking for, the latest 3D high definition television, and they're on your website and they're reading reviews, and you get a sense that this is the thing that the customer wants. And then offline, they go into your store and they purchase it. When they come home, if that scenario is not connected, next time they go on your website, you're going to keep trying to sell them that damn television that they've bought. And my argument is, in a connected world, when they log in, to your website, when they're authenticated, when you know their profile, and you link that to the transaction, the first thing you're going to say to them is, hey, you bought a telly, why don't you register it with us? And that's about the power of connections.
Excellent. Jamie, great stuff, man. Honestly, thanks so much for taking time out of jumping out. Great to see you again, and we'll definitely be talking to you very soon.
I hope so. Listen, guys, have a great show. I'm loving listening to it.
Thank you.
Great stuff. That right there, Jamie Anderson of SAP. Big thanks to him taking time up. But unfortunately, we do in fact have to move on. Now, we're going to go ahead and get to our next news segment right now. We're going to go ahead and talk about SDL right now because on February 22nd, MarketWatch published a press release on SDL's latest solution to enable real-time chat translation for LivePerson. Now, this new integration actually brings together the industry's first cloud platform for real-time translation and industry-leading enterprise chat products. So really, how big is this for SDL? Really just launching a tool for their customers that provides a real-time chat translation solution. How big is this, guys, really? Scott?
I think this is huge, and not just for SDL, but it's huge for all of us, right? I mean, this notion of being able to say now that in real time, your online chats, we're talking about a customer experience. So many of them have used this, this service, essentially this LivePerson service, right, to enable chat. To be able to do that across, in this case, 35 languages is just amazing to be able to do that in real time. And the implications are not just obviously in chat, but I'm quite sure next step for them is now you're talking about on social media and Twitter and those sorts of things. We know already that it's greater than 50% of the tweets are not in English, so to speak. I mean, just the impact of this and the potential of this to really continue to flatten out this earth, I mean, is really, really, it's upon us, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, social media, I feel like that's when my linguistic limitations are really called to fore, like just having the ability in real time, and not just like a Google Translate machine translation, but something that's a little bit more tuned to the subject matter, that could just open an enormous amount of doors from the customer experience, because they have access to more, but also from the internal purposes of just changing the dynamics of staffing a call center.
Exactly. And they've put this product in their, it's called their Be Global. It's their cloud platform, essentially. So that now, I mean, certainly they've made this partnership and they've made it available to the LivePerson chat capability. But of course, this is going to be able to extend into other things, right? So we're going to see really this start to just skyrocket, I think, and the potential is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
but we keep talking about it from SDL perspective. What happens? I mean, does this open the door for, the other companies? I mean, you talk about opening the doors for a lot of consumers and a lot of different ideas, but it also has to mean that some of the other companies out there, we got to get to the boat. We have to actually step to the plate right now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, as far as the other competitors, Lionbridge has a product which is kind of in a different category. It's called GeoFluent, but it's we're seeing a lot of demand there around forums, where you have expertise forums, and one person is posting an answer, but they're posting it in a different language than the person who's asking the question, and we do the translation in place. And that's huge because it's breaking down the barriers between the different segments of your customer community, because it used to be that you'd have a customer base that was an island unto itself because they couldn't help their peers that didn't speak the same language. So it changes the dynamics of a community, a support community.
And I think you were probably talking, maybe as well asking about SDL, the WCM platform, and does it raise the bar for the other WCMers as well? And certainly it does for the, it raises the bar obviously for the globalization companies like yours as well, like Lionbridge, but also for the other WCM companies. I mean, this was a product that's separate. This is the part of SDL. This is their typical globalization practice. This wasn't necessarily specific to their WCM product, Trillion. But at the same time, the notion that SDL has always been one of the leaders in globalization, and that they've kind of set this bar in many areas, and that the WCM vendors, you can see lots of applications for this type of capability to be interwoven into their, interwoven, we'll slip a play on words there, to be pulled into some of their products as well, all right, so that they can kind of basically make use of this capability. And they're all pushing to social, so translation is, everywhere. And it
goes to what you would say, the word that sticks out in my mind, community. I mean, that's really what's going on right now, and what's taking place is smaller pop-up communities left and right all over the place, and that's really the important factor, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying to visualize a content management system workflow where I'm jumping in between languages through the path of that language. You know, the legal team is speaking French, and I'm publishing to them, and they're reviewing what I've written. It's pretty cool.
No, it's pretty amazing, and I think, you know, just in general, why this is relevant is I think we used to think about those organizations which were global, right, and that had an obvious global presence. But I think now we're really talking about, in this day and age, everybody is global, whether you necessarily intend it to be or not.
That's totally
And so I think, you know, we'll talk in a little bit about how you at Lionbridge kind of help facilitate that. But I think so many organizations are about their product has got to be relevant. And so if you don't think that there are some folks who are not able to engage with you in your chat capability, guess what? They're out there waiting probably. And because it's just, by definition, our audience is global now. And so I think this flattening that and making that available to everybody is just really good.
The thing I absolutely love right now is that you've kind of twice now led us into the next topic perfectly. It's like, all right, segue time. This is he's just
get this
leading
guy
us
out
on.
of here. Who
I was
needs
gonna say,
you? I mean,
just solid to say the least. So let's go and let's talk about that blog post, content management for global business. January, Seth, you blogged about URL management for global business and how website owners really want their global URLs to communicate their purpose, the market, language, etc. Kind of elaborate on really what that all means at this point and what the autonomy, if you will, of a URL looks like, as well as how it applies in a CMS application.
Sure. I guess I'll start with why it matters. If you're going through the trouble of translating your website, localizing your website, it's because you think there's a market or there's different language speakers in your home market that you want to reach. And once you reach them, you want to engage them. And the best way, so I think that's obvious, right? But even though that's obvious, a lot of companies are taking a really long time to get to that point. So they do their localization as like, oh yeah, we did that, just as a like anti-stakes type of thing, but not really trying to maximize the leverage of that spend. URLs are important to that goal because most people find websites via search. Mm-hmm. And I don't pretend to know all the algorithms, but I do know that the search engines are trying to deliver the most relevant content to their visitors. I don't know how it works exactly. And URLs for search engines are important because the URL is the index of the web. It's how it organizes its understanding of the web, and that's absolutely critical. You want to be in the right neighborhood, so to speak, so that the right speakers find them. And so we think a customer asked me, like, we want to localize the website. What do we do for our URLs? And I talked them through a process that I realized I should probably write a blog post about it. So anyway, for a URL, there's really 4 pieces of information that you want to communicate. One is the actual content itself, the purpose and the context of the content, mm-hmm. and you capture that through the path. And then there's these other things that you've been doing this for a long time, but there's these new dimensions that you need to capture here because this is your first attempt into serving those local markets. And you have 3 additional levers to work with to segment your content so that the search engine and once the visitor's there sees that this is a experience, this is a website just for me, and I'm going to stay here, and it's the information that I need. So the 3 levers you have, one is the left to right, is the subdomain. Mm-hmm. Then you have your domain. Then you have your top-level domain. And you need to use those 3 levers to communicate the market that you're trying to reach and also the language that you're in. Our recommendation is to always own the top-level domain, the .com, the .es, yep. For the market you want to reach. And the reason for that is the intention of the top-level domain. That's the country that this is for. Mm-hmm. And so you want to buy that domain. You want to own it. Mm-hmm. If you don't own it, someone else is.
Yeah.
And so you want to buy that domain, and if you own it, you should use that to target that market. So your Spanish market with .es. Mm-hmm. And then you have language, and my recommendation is to use the subdomain to represent language. So if you have a Canadian site, You could do en.yoursite.ca, and then your French is fr. And what that does is it creates a nice matrix of all your different sites and the different market language or your locale combinations that you've done.
I think this is, I wish that you had written this post about a year ago, because I had a client who was a global brand, and they were struggling with this notion that they're kind of, from an SEO perspective, their countries, their local markets were actually competing for attention, right? Because so much of it was driven by this URL. And we think, to listen to you talk about domains and subdomains, there might be some in the audience who are marketers and think, I don't need to know or care about any of this. And in fact, it was so ultra relevant, because the way that they had positioned it, they did it in a different way than you might recommend. And so therefore they had all of the English sites, regardless of where they actually were, in Australia and in the UK, and competing for space, because it wasn't taking the local geography in place when somebody was doing a search from one of those countries.
Yeah, the search engine says, like, here's a site, something.com. Who's it for?
Exactly.
And then you have all these kind of, in the path, all these different segmentation. And it's all one big site, so it's hard for them to say this site is for this population.
Yeah, so this is super relevant, for folks who, we just got done saying that everyone is global, whether you mean to be or not necessarily. Yeah. And so, by the way, does that mean that I should go buy all of the TLDs out there?
We've seen that happen, though. I've seen it firsthand here at the Pulse, where literally people are coming out, well, that's a good idea, and then they buy it all the way through. Is that the role that we should be playing?
I would say your primary brand, you should defend your brand. Otherwise a competitor might buy it, and then what do you do? So if you don't want to have that other TLD in a different to a different company, you should probably think about buying yourself.
Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about there is just buying the mysite.fr.co.uk, .ca, .everything.
And then once you have those, you can manage your subdomains to all the languages that appear in there. So once you own that, it's just a matter of your domain registrar, like plugging in the different languages there.
One thing I always find interesting is when we've seen companies do it, some don't and they don't take advantage of it, but the misspellings as well. And I think it's an interesting point to make, because you see people, we'll buy mysite.com. Well, what about my site spelled with 2 E's at the end?
Sure.
But, it happens, and it's a necessity, I think, in my mind.
Yeah, the market is so mature that it's not a land grab anymore, because like all of them are bought up. But if you have a new company and you're trying to really aggressively market your brand, you should keep an eye on your digital presence out there.
I wanted to get one more question on this topic, if we could, which is you point out kind of the three general, by path, by domain, and essentially also by session or cookie, but ways that organizations can essentially deal with this issue, right? So you can do it in the URL, or there's also, now, the reason I wanted to ask this question is because I know you recommended highly against the latter of the three, the by session domain. But
that's the fourth one.
You see, the fourth one. You see so often this notion that I come to a website, and oh, by the way, there's one who is a former client who made one of the top global companies list based on their web presence. And what you first get is this splash page that says choose your country, sort of a thing, and then that sticks with you throughout. What's the problem with that?
Well, so you'd have to look at where you landed after that. So if it's a different URL, then it's just it's like a links page, and that's good for SEO. You have all the links to the different sites. But if the URLs are all identical, you've really screwed yourself, because search engine crawlers don't take cookies.
Yep.
So it's all of your translated content is totally invisible to the search engine if you've used a cookie to base your localization logic to say this person gets this French version of that page. Yeah, so you've wasted your translation money.
That whole dynamic ability to be able to show content to people as it's relevant. Don't use it for language is what we're basically saying. Right?
Exactly, because you just have to accept that the search engines won't.
They don't get to pick it up by language. They don't get to be somebody and have an actual session. So I thought that was a really, it was the one thing that you almost seemed like didn't include in your post that to me I really found captivating.
I was such bad advice. I was going to just ignore it, but I figured it's
it's great. I thought it was great.
Great stuff. Seth, great post, obviously. Great having you on the show today. Unfortunately, your time's up. We got to kick you out of the seat. We got to make more room. We're running out of space on the set. We're going to have to build a new set, folks, because this place is going to be jam-packed in just a few moments, because we're going to be welcoming into the show Lisa Welchman is going to be joining us in just a few moments. She's going to be discussing who owns your website from a governance standpoint. So that is coming up. We also have our Spotlight segment with Elcom, Finally, we'll also have Rapid Fire with Scott in just a few seconds. So don't go anywhere. You're watching CMS Connected right here on the Pulse Network.
Businesses today demand a powerful web content management and online marketing platform that can provide the best value at an affordable price with unlimited website possibilities. Kentico, the .NET Enterprise Marketing Solution and web content management platform of choice, powers more than 12,000 websites in over 84 countries, which means you get a stable, well-tested solution. Fully loaded with over 350 web parts and controls and more than 80 extensible modules. Kentico provides you with a fully integrated solution for building your online presence and running successful online marketing campaigns. It allows you to quickly launch an effective B2B or B2C site, intranet, online store, or branded online community, fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. Organizations need to be more effective at catering to the personalities of their site visitors and the way they consume information. Sites need to more dynamically adjust to each site visitor to optimize their experience. Kentico EMS delivers a complete customer experience management platform that provides all of the necessary capabilities for interactive marketing, from planning and conception through optimization and execution. And lastly, analysis. Gain the insight required to analyze your marketing performance. Align the content, execution, and analytics critical for successful interactive campaigns, speeding delivery, and optimizing return on investment. With a fully integrated set of online marketing tools, Kentico EMS can improve your online marketing efforts, which allows you to focus on what's important, making your business successful. Test drive Kentico EMS today to get a complete appreciation of all its powerful features and capabilities.
Welcome back into CMS Connected, everyone. I am Tyler Papin. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us. A great show up to this point, but you know what? We've got a lot more great stuff to get to right now. So right now, I'd like to welcome in a very special guest today. We welcome in, joining us today from Welchman Pierpoint, we welcome in Lisa Welchman. Lisa, welcome in. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Beautiful weather.
Excellent. I was going to say, she's up from Baltimore, so she's enjoying the lovely weather here in the Northeast, correct?
Yeah.
Good to hear. So Lisa, late last year you gave a talk about content strategy forum event in London about content strategy within the context of web governance. Tell us a little bit more on that. Give us kind of the Cliff Notes version of it, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I gave 2 talks in London last year, and both of them focused on web governance and content, and the concept that you can make all sorts of good decisions about content strategy for your website or for your social channels, whatever the case may be, but it's not always the case that the players inside the organization are enabled to actually do that job. So you might say, this is the way it's going to be, and you want to go around and tell all the troops in the organization, do it this way, and they turn around and say, we don't want to. Mm-hmm. So where do you get the authority to actually mandate? I hate to use the M word, I'll use C word and M word, mandate and control, right? Mandate that people do certain types of activities or maintain certain types of standards. And that's really at the crux of web governance, is deciding who gets to decide those sorts of things.
Okay, I was going to say, because to me, when I look at it, people start to wonder, say, are there too many chiefs, not enough Indians, or how are we looking?
Well, I don't know about chiefs and Indians. That confused me a little bit, the whole chief and Indian thing. I think what really is at the crux of the whole web governance issue is that people are used to making their own decisions as it relates to things that go online, right? So the organic nature of the web, how it grew, all of us were webmasters with Notepad. You know, we coded a little bit, we designed a little bit, we made decisions, we indexed search engines, we implemented web content management technology. And as the profession has grown, things have gotten more specialized and more confused. And so it's really, the crux of that is how do you sort all of that out and manage it, and who's in charge of what, and how do you allow enough autonomy so business units or schools inside of a university can actually get work done and keep the quality up at the same time. So that's the huge challenge. I think the analogy of chiefs and Indians isn't really apt, because it's really a community activity, collaborative activity that people are doing inside the organization. So.
And you were inside an organization once, and you referenced, we all used to do this. You were a tool girl person. You were running this for a large organization at one point and dealing with this firsthand. And since that time, you've been really beating this governance drum for quite a long time. One of the lone voices out there for quite some time.
Yeah.
Is it coming back around? Are people? I think they are. Are people starting to? Are they listening to you now?
Yeah, I mean, last year I wrote a blog post saying this. It was 2011 was the year of web governance. So I don't know if it was or not. I'm just going to say yes, it was the year of web governance. But I think what's really happening is that people have really hit an impasse, right? So at a certain point, you can kind of make it up as you go along, but as something grows and gets bigger and bigger and you have a larger number of people interacting with your website, setting up social communications with a variety of things and operating in all of these different channels, if there isn't a way to organize all of that inside the organization, it just turns into chaos. So people want to do these really big, bold initiatives inside the organization, or they want to do multi-channel content delivery, which requires a certain amount of standardization. And so they're trying to do that inside the organization and realizing, I don't have the authority to make anybody do anything. So there's this stasis that's happened where they want to do these big projects and they really can't move. So they're turning and looking at the organizational dynamics and figuring out what needs to change about the way we work together so that we can get, these projects done.
I know that when I'm being brought into organizations to help them with a selection, for example, I'm often warning them in advance. Number one, I've pulled you in a number of times and you've helped to save some of my customers from themselves.
Yeah, at least on the whip.
Yeah, no, really, and it's beneficial because what I end up telling them, right, is that so long you've been blaming the old CMS. You've been saying that, no, Mr. Department Manager, we're not going to put that up because we can't. And then suddenly a new initiative comes up and you've got some budget for a new product and you're bringing that in and all of a sudden all those people come back to your door like, remember how you were telling me for so long that I couldn't have this and you didn't have to. Now you've got to deal with that. So I tell people like all of a sudden that barrier is gone and you really need to figure out who can do what are you going to allow to people, who's going to be able to decide this. Is that what you're essentially coming in to help folks do?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's really a few different things. One of them is who has accountability for overall digital quality inside the organization. So if the website's bad, whose fault is it? Right? There's a lot of finger pointing going on, but we really don't know whose fault it is. And the reality is it's probably everyone in the organization's fault, but really, where does that accountability lie? And then there are these two big pieces about policy and standards. So are you actually protected from the risk of operating online? And this really gets people kind of tight because they don't want to be controlled. But the reality is if you're operating in a policy-free zone, it means that anybody can do anything. So there are certain things that people take care of, IT, security, terms of use, privacy. There's some general things. But then there are other things like web records retention policy, right? Where is your website from 6 years ago? And does it matter that you can't get a hold of it or does it not? I don't know what the answer to that is, but that's a question. So that's really the risk piece, and that's really something that's dealing with not only digital subject matter experts, but also in-house counsel. And then there's the standards piece, which is really about quality, right? So people like to think that they can operate in a standards-free zone and that that's innovation, right? And the reality is, yeah, if you're inventing something, that is innovation, and maybe you don't have any standards. But once you have an intent of what you're trying to achieve, operating within a standards-based framework is actually going to get you there faster. And I think the proof in the pudding is our profession at large, which is the World Wide Web operates on a standards-based framework. Everybody's going to the W3C and figuring out what these various standards are, and if it didn't, we wouldn't have jobs. So I think that's a message that I try to bring inside the organization and help them understand that the standards are going to actually enable the collaboration and growth instead of hinder it.
Yeah, it's odd, right? It's
counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive. It's kind of like the more standards, the more liberating, almost.
That's
you
right.
get some
It
like
can be.
you
If
know
you get
the
it right.
playground, and you can play in all of this space right here.
That's right. That's right. And but you have to know what the space is. Yeah.
And so are there efforts now is there a way to automate that at all? I mean, I love to hear as I've kind of prepped my customers with things that they know that they're going to inevitably face, and then the poor vendors walk in for their demo time, and they get peppered with these sorts of questions, and inevitably the answer is, it's workflow. It's all about workflow, right? But what is there a way to automate any of this sort of stuff? You talk about standards, any of that?
I mean, I would love to be able to have some web people, business people wind-up toys that I could just wind up and let them, and they'd make your organizational, presence. But the reality is this is a very human activity, right? And that the value of it is that we're communicating with people, we're facilitating transactions, we're breaking boundaries, we're changing political systems through all this technology. It's very, very human, and we don't want to lose that element of it. But the compliance with standards is something that you can check. You can measure whether or not people inside a very large organization are actually complying with the standards that you've set forth. And sometimes that's a really good step towards actually affecting change inside the organization. Because even if you don't have the authority to mandate that people follow standards, if you can say, look, here's what the standards are, and we've measured whether or not your section of the website complies with these standards or not, and you don't, that information is very useful to people. Most people aren't really that kind of outrageous, right? Most people want to do something in a quality way, and they want to get work done, and they want to feel proud of what they've done.
Yeah.
So when they see that they're not in compliance with what you consider to be best practices or good practices, then they'll frequently, not fall in line, but start to comply and move together as a unit.
Yeah.
Lisa, I wish we could keep going. We really could, but we can keep going. But you got to stick around. Can you stay with us for the Spotlight segment?
I certainly shall.
Good to hear. Excellent stuff. So that's what we're going to go ahead and move on to right now is In the Spotlight. So in the Spotlight today, we've got Elcom CMS. Now Elcom, a .NET platform for the enterprise web content management solutions, recently announced the release of version 7.6 of their flagship product. Now with HQ in headquarters, in Sydney, Australia, the company has made a significant effort in 2011 to bring to the North American market, opening offices in New York, Los Angeles, while adding some top integration partners such as Falcon-Software and Rounded Cube. So Scott, what can you tell us about Elcom, and really how good is this platform?
Sure. So Elcom, as you said, is relatively new into the U.S. market, so it's new on the lips of many folks. They are essentially, it's a .NET platform. We said that, right? It tends to sell into the smaller and mid-market area, right? So they often, some capabilities that they have are a lot around the intranet space. They can manage your corporate website or your corporate web presence. They have a learning management capability, which is pretty unique, frankly, among products. There aren't many that have a true kind of LMS. So they help with that. I think they're, the challenge that I have is that everybody kind of wants to be the big dog. Everybody wants to say that we manage the enterprise, and everybody wants to talk managing the corporate website. And even some of the terms that they're talking about in the 7.6 release, they talk about personalization, and they're able to do some personalization. In fact, what that personalization capability is that essentially that if someone comes from a web search engine like a Google or a Bing or something like that, and they come to your website, that they can essentially match up that keyword that you use there and pair that with metadata that somebody has input according to content, and essentially get you to the right place faster. That's not really personal. That's not really, taking what I know about Lisa. You were here, the last time, and here's what you didn't explore, and so I've made inferences, or you've told me specifically about what you would like to see. It's not that level of personalization. So we're kind of taking some liberties, I think, with that name a little bit. I like the product. I think it serves its market well if it focuses on its base, which is your mid-market, tend to be some of the smaller, very departmental-oriented solutions. And the only thing I'd knock it on it is the interface, and I've told this to them before, to their product managers, that the interface is it's very modular. So you can pick and choose all the capabilities that you want, and essentially you license it by module. And they're these square chiclet looking things. And it just reminds me of Lotus Notes. And I was on Lotus Notes before, and that is not a good memory for me. So I don't love that about it, and I wish they'd change it. But so at least I want to bring you into this. And I know that you don't portray to be an Elcom specific.
I'm not a tool girl.
You're not a tool girl.
That's right.
Although you kind of play one on TV sometimes.
Yeah, I do play one on TV sometimes.
So I see challenges with this. It's kind of much like SharePoint, where whenever inside an organization, if you're trying to kind of roll out an intranet and some of these things that claim to be very user-friendly, and you're going to, as IT, us techies are always trying to add value back to the business and get things out there for them. So when you're in kind of an enterprise environment, and we're not just talking about managing a corporate website, but allowing people to collaborate, post documents, share things, sorts of things like that, I see SharePoint getting a really bad name in this place too, because it just kind of proliferates. That obviously has to do with governance. What's your take on all that? How do you combat that?
It's always a challenge, and sometimes I'm at odds with tool vendors. They can be my friends or they can not be my friends, right? Because frequently I'm coming inside an organization and saying, stop trying to fix the problem with a tool, right? So usually the response to, we want to be able to do our own thing or have our own design, or we want business units to have more autonomy, is, give them a tool and let them implement it and do it themselves, absent a standards-based framework, and you end up with a mess.
Yeah.
And these tools that are very easy to implement, that's what people do. They just spread like a virus inside the organization. And if there is no governance, it just makes the problem worse. So, people generally, when they have a website quality problem or any kind of challenge inside, they do one of two things. They either implement more software or they redesign the thing, right? And usually the crux of the problem isn't either of those two things. I mean, you might have a bad design and you might need a better WCM system, but the reality is it's most likely going to be at the core a people problem. And so that's kind of rubs me a little bit when I see these technologies where they're saying, oh, ease of implementation, because, if you were a software vendor, what would you want to do? Sell like 6 versions of your software inside of the enterprise, or just one, if it's all that's needed? So sometimes they're not always on the right side of governance from my perspective.
I don't love what you have to say when you come in.
Yeah, well, but I'm nice. I say it with a smile.
But I think, you can say that it takes a little bit off them. Some of them get a bad name because of the way they are being misused, right? And so I think to kind of take that back off of the technology and just, unfortunately, they did themselves harm by setting these expectations and these bars real high that we're going to be able to do all this stuff for you. And in fact, it's not really, it's an enabler, certainly, but it's an enabler for a lot of good and bad, right?
Sure, it's like it's not the software stupid, it's you,
yeah.
Right? It's the way that you're working inside your organization. That's just,
Exactly.
Sometimes what it is. And people don't want to change, so.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, one of the things going back to Elcom, we were actually did a previous CMS-Connected in New York City. I know you were there.
Yeah.
We talked about the implementation of that. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that you brought up there, Scott, you talked about taking the content with you afterwards and what happens with that. Kind of bring that back a little, because I think that's an interesting point to really make about it, isn't it?
So remind me again, because that was a few months ago. Taking the content with me afterwards. I don't remember that.
All right.
I'm trying to think of the point that I was probably making there. But
so you essentially basically made the point of saying along the lines of that, hey, guess what? After, say, you're done with Elcom and you wanted to move on after the fact about taking the content with you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Is that
quickly, too. We've only got a couple seconds left.
So in many of these cases, I think it's not just about when you're getting into these tools about what can you provide me, but how easy is it going to be for me to be able to move away from them? Because inevitably, the lifespan of these things in an organization is 3 to 5 years. And so it's about how easy is it going to be for me to be able to pull out of this situation and migrate away from it if necessary.
All right. Excellent stuff. So, Lisa, honestly, thank you so much for taking time and coming
Thanks
up
for
here.
having
Really
me.
Great stuff today. Great, awesome stuff to say the least. We'll just leave it at that.
Thanks.
Excellent. That right there, Lisa Welchman of Welchman Pierpoint. Excellent stuff. But unfortunately, folks, we do in fact have to move on from the spotlight. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to be moving on to rapid fire with Scott Liewehr. So this segment is really all about news, events, commentary, all about the CMS industry, and it's sponsored by the CMS report. So that is the thing and the key ingredient to all of this that really makes this happen. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump right into these things right now, and we're going to go ahead, basically put a minute on the clock for each one of these topics in particular, get them all lined up, and let's go ahead and let Scott kind of rip on it, if you will. So Scott, well, let's kind of set the clock, if you will. Are you ready for it?
I'm as ready as I'm going to be. I barely made my plane here today. But you know what? The Bears picked up Brandon Marshall. I'm psyched about that. So everything is good. There's nothing going to be wrong.
He was going to work it in there some way.
I got my Bears bracelet on. Go Bears. Go Bears.
So first off, we're going to go ahead and let's talk about Ectron. Ectron was just ranked #1 WCM vendor in a new report. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So this report, a company called Hypatia, an analyst firm, put this report out essentially ranking Ectron #1. I've never heard of Hypatia before. I don't mean to say that I know all of the analyst groups that are out there, but the report seemed to me to be pretty flawed, to say the least. They rank, like the MQ and like Forrester, they have a quadrant essentially that they have. One axis is product range, corporate vision, and then the other axis is maturity, global reach, and execution capabilities. They, look at credit to Ectron. They got ranked #1. If I'm their CMO, I'm going to broadcast that to the world as well. But I'll tell you this, this on its face, the planets that they call them were all the wrong sizes, and I just saw an awful lot of flaws in this. But I think #2 is the most important thing is there is no best. They actually rank #1, #2, #3. There is no best. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Baskin-Robbins had 31 flavors for a reason. We all have our preferences for very good reasons. So I just don't like them on their face.
All right, excellent stuff, and he did it in a minute. Let's see if he can keep that up. So the next one we're going to go ahead and talk about is online accessibility for the special needs user. Thoughts?
I love this topic. I wanted this specifically on myself. OC Portal, a founder by the name of Chris Graham, sent a tweet out a couple of weeks ago talking about how OC Portal has made its product, it's an open source product, made it much more available and accessible to its visually impaired users. I just thought, what a tremendous story of innovation. He realized through the forums that he had some blind users who were power users, reached out to them and created a separate section of the forum for that. They gave him some advice about how to use things like landmarks. It's a new capability to essentially allow the browser to focus in as you're using tools to essentially which read back a website for you if you can't read it yourself. And just amazing that within 24 hours of that recommendation, he went and pulled that capability back into the tool. And to me, this is a tremendous, not only for Chris and not only for OC Portal, wonderful on you, but also for the open source community and this notion of using the community to essentially create your requirements and responding and innovating appropriately.
He did it.
Wow.
Love to see that. All right, he's moving quickly. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about EpiServer. And EpiServer announces the acquisition, their e-commerce provider, MediaChase.
Yeah, so EpiServer acquired MediaChase. This has been coming for a bit of time. I was actually burned on this. There was a project that I had a couple of weeks ago that was, a few months ago, that actually had a commerce component to it. And so I pulled in EpiServer knowing that they had EpiServer Commerce. I only found out actually at the time that MediaChase was a partner at that point and was not actually a part of their core product. A little bit, they hadn't exactly promoted that and told everybody about that up front. So that was semi-embarrassing, although my fellow analysts didn't necessarily know that's either, so I didn't lose too much face. That said, I think that what it brings to mind is, number one, this is great for EpiServer and for EpiServer customers. I think MediaChase is a great tool and they've incorporated it nicely. I think the point, though, that I'd like to make is in the same way that I was kind of wasn't aware of this, it brings to mind that everybody should know what's in your product and these capabilities that are being told to you. How well are they going to integrate? What's your support model going to look like afterward? And how much work are you going to have to do to get this out the door? So good for EpiServer, though.
Very cool indeed. So we're going to go ahead and move on to CMS vendors publishing white papers or conducting webinars out there right now with topics such as how to select a web CMS solution. Aren't fooling anyone really, are they?
Look, this falls close to my heart. Obviously, I do an awful lot of CMS selections, and even just back in December, 4 months ago now, we had a show on here about how to select the CMS. I think it's a valid point that, look, at the end of the day, content marketing is all about trying to provide information that's valuable to your audience, regardless of whether it's about your product per se or not. So I agree that for vendors to put out information about how to select them is great, but when they do it and they slant it such that it's kind of very much to their benefit and slanted in their favor, then that's just disingenuous and not a nice thing to do. At that point, you're not serving your audience, you're only serving yourself. So kind of gig is up on that. That said, using a third-party analyst, not like myself or somebody else to come in and help you, maybe write a white paper third-party and sponsor that, I will say that I've reached out to many of those vendors, and this tends to be the most active downloaded thing on theirs when they have a white paper like that. So there's a thirst for this information, certainly, and I'd say, go out and get it, but just maybe when you're reading it from a vendor, scrutinize it just a bit.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's move on. Let's talk about blogging. Let's first talk about Percussion, because Falcon-Software research shows that fewer than 21% of technology companies have corporate blogs at this point in time. Interesting fact.
Yeah, I was actually moderating a panel that the Pulse Network actually put on a couple of weeks ago in New York, where Aaron Dunn, who's the Vice President of Marketing for Percussion, made this point. It had come out that day, actually. Essentially, 20% of even technical companies that they took a look at their website essentially didn't have a blog. And so his point was that, look, if that's really, you're missing the opportunity there to drive social engagement. And I think, while that's certainly true, it's a very good point, and I think it's a call to action for everyone. Everyone's working on stepping up their game, and even those who, the cobbler's shoes, so to speak, those who are technology minded. That said, my question was essentially, I don't know that I would go read a blog on Dell.com per se. So I think this notion of what content marketing starts to do in blogs is teaching enterprises essentially for how to communicate more personally, and spreading that information back throughout the rest of your website is just as valuable as coordinating it off in a blog section.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's move on to basically where we started the show by talking about Forrester, because Forrester predicts 2012 to be a breakout year for content management.
Yeah, I think this is, look, there's no way that I'm going to go and disagree with this. They weren't talking specifically about web content management, which is, my forte specifically. They were talking about enterprise content management in general. And they said on there that 97% of organizations say they plan to include mobile access. So we talk again about mobile being a big driver to ECM solutions. So it's really about, how do companies work? And now we got the counter ticking up on me, so I'm a little bit confused here. But, ensuring that employees get access in the right way to all the content. They're going to use their own devices. It's going to be BYOD, bring your own device. And so I think that innovation is really continuing to drive even the ECM market. So we're seeing everyone just continue to invest in this. I think that it's the right thing to do. You're going to want to consider your standards. You're going to want to consider how this gets used and make sure that you're not putting a technical solution to something that's a business problem, or that you're using it to enable you to solve that business problem most appropriately. But otherwise, I think this is nothing but good news. And certainly, as an analyst in this space, I don't disagree with it whatsoever. Going to be a great year.
Well, we figured, I hate the way shows end just counting down. We said, let's count out, let's have a big build-up moment. That's really the most important way of it all. Now, I take full blame of it. Production team, it's on me. I was the one that actually created the graphics, so put that one on me, the host. So, guys, appreciate it. Excellent stuff. Really absolutely love the show again, as always.
I really love the way the show is starting to work out. We're
It's
really,
starting
I think,
to
are
fit
coming
together
into
and-
our own there. And yeah.
I was going to say, one thing I kind of want to reiterate to everybody out there is to make sure you keep using the hashtag CMS-Connected, because we love to see your feedback, your thoughts, and obviously what ways we can improve upon the show, because it's really about you guys, and that's what this show is really all dedicated to. So for all of our guests today, for Scott Liewehr, we got to make sure we say big thank you to all of our sponsors, obviously Falcon-Software, as well as, who else are we sponsoring?
CM Pros.
Excellent. I love
20,000 members now, by the way. Just this past month we hit that.
Really? No kidding?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent stuff indeed. So, for Scott Liewehr and for all of our guests today here on the show, I am Pyburn. We'll see you next time right here on CMS Connected.